In the One Piece community, the word power creep or power crept gets thrown around a lot. And I could act like I don't know why, but I do. And it mainly surrounds characters like Kaido and Katakuri and how the story may have already shifted away from their level of power entirely. And it's mainly to fixate on characters who are far more important to the story now. So, in today's video, I intend on exploring power creep in One Piece to truly figure out if it has actually gone too far or not. So, strap in, because I'm about to get real in depth with this video. But before I get into the video, if you guys enjoy content like this, you know what to do. Hit that like button and subscribe, as I do post content like this regularly, and to be honest, it's a win-win. You guys show me love and support, and I give back to you in the form of videos. Whether it's One Piece, other anime, or just fiction in general, in due time I plan on covering it, so be there when I go there. But I feel like I've rambled on long enough, so I jump straight into the video and discuss if One Piece power creep has gone too far. Now, before I begin the video, I want to say this: One Piece does have power creep, and for those who think that it's just an adventure story, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're extremely mistaken. One Piece has power systems and literally has characters who are stated to be the strongest in the world. I mean, you even have Zoro, who wants to become the world's strongest swordsman. The whole argument of One Piece not being a battle shonen makes absolutely zero sense. So yes, this is genuinely a topic that we can talk about and take seriously. Now, before I actually delve into One Piece power creep, how about I explain what power creep is in general? Now, quite frankly, power creep is the easiest thing to understand when it comes down to battle shonens. I'm going to use Dragon Ball as an example because it is a story that I believe 99% of anime fans have at least delved into, so I can explain it through using Dragon Ball. Now, in the Namek saga, the main enemy is Frieza. Now, even before Frieza, you had the Ginyu Force, and then before them, you had Zarbon and Dodoria. Now, this right here technically isn't power creep. That is just Goku going through the enemies of the Frieza Force and then getting to Frieza at the end. Instead, what power creep really is Frieza compared to Cell. Now, what really happened between Frieza and Cell was that the story progressed, and so as the story went on, the enemies got stronger. An even better way of me explaining this would actually just be Frieza and then the androids. The androids were far stronger than Frieza, even though you would think that Frieza should be stronger than some androids, but no, the androids were actually stronger than him, and this is just story progression, and so by proxy, power creep. Power creep occurs when things go on. People who play gacha games know exactly what power creep is. For instance, I play Dokkan, so when I play Dokkan, I know that if I summon on a banner right now, in a year's time, the unit is going to be power crept. If you play Genshin, it's going to be the exact same thing. I think everybody should understand what I'm getting at when it comes to power creep, so I now think I can focus on the points of this video. Now, for One Piece power creep, surprisingly, I think it handles it a lot better than a lot of other stories. You see, One Piece has a plethora of powers, meaning that in the pre-time skip at least, you could have a different power and you could still be strong by the end of it. For instance, somebody like Enel technically should be stronger than Lucci because of his moveset, and he isn't affected by Luffy being him technically because Luffy was his natural enemy and threw him off completely. That means that even if Lucci did technically one-shot Luffy the next arc, if Enel was even able to do a smidgen of damage on Luffy with his actual powers, he would have easily beaten Luffy. That is a way to prevent power creep when moving on inside your story, but then you have somebody like Crocodile who was then beaten by Luffy in a fair manner, and then you have somebody like Lucci later on being on a stronger Luffy's level. We know that Crocodile shouldn't even be in the exact same conversation as Luffy, but because of how the story went, he was technically weaker than Lucci, and this is a form of power creep. Now, I'm not here to say that this was bad power creep, as I do believe that with the story going on, that yeah, Luffy should have gotten that much stronger in that space of time. It was literally hundreds of chapters. But when we look at it from a very neutral standpoint of where Crocodile is meant to be in terms of the world, that is bad. and I think it's bad mainly due to Crocodile being a Warlord of the Sea while Lucci is just a CP9 agent. They shouldn't even be in the exact same stratosphere as each other. As I said before, from the story standpoint, it isn't that bad, but obviously from where they should be portrayed, that is bad, but that's just power scaling on a different level. That has nothing to do with power creep as a whole. Now when you fast forward into the post time skip, this is where I do believe that power creep did become an issue, and the only reason being I feel like it was an issue is due to Haki. Now I feel like Haki does actually speed up the process of power creep because so many different variations of Haki were being introduced, meaning that the enemy before is going to be power crept immediately when you go into the next arc, like we saw with Doflamingo and Katakuri. Now I'm not here to say that Doflamingo being far weaker than Katakuri is a bad thing. I think that's actually fine since the story actually portray him out to be that way, and I think that's a thing that a lot of people do misconstrue and just not understand when it comes out to power creep. If somebody is portrayed to be a certain way and they end up being that certain way, do not be surprised. But here is where the issue lies. When the story continues to go on, people who are meant to be on the level of Doflamingo then end up becoming far stronger than him due to what the story is doing. For instance, Law went from being absolutely bullied by Doflamingo to then being able to take attacks from Kaido and react to Kaido and then fight Big Mom. Now I'm not here to say that Law should never have done that, but I'm here to say that with the story progressing, he jumped up many levels above Doflamingo after being extremely inferior to him, and we don't even get to see him train or anything. That's just the story progressing and him just naturally getting stronger because of the story doing that. Now I'm not here to say that his awakening didn't change anything. Of course it did, but from being absolutely torched by Doflamingo to then being able to sort of keep up with Yonko in any capacity, that is insanity. And in my opinion, any arguments that you do have against that kind of makes no sense, because we saw Luffy go through his hard fight with Katakuri only to go on and try and meet Kaido and get absolutely one-shotted. But then the exact same Law that was getting bullied by Doflamingo later on, who has been through less of what Luffy has been through, is now swapping hands kinda with Kaido and Big Mom. It doesn't really add up. Now putting that to the side for a moment, how a character can actually avoid power creep is something that Katakuri and Kaido did. Now I'm not here to say that Katakuri completely avoided power creep. In actuality, he's probably one of the characters worst affected by this, but how he was able to avoid it for a little while was by technically being stronger than Luffy, but obviously him losing in the end. As we all saw, the fight was Luffy catching up to him and Katakuri obviously just giving up in the end because Luffy said something and he was like, okay, I'll give you the win. This meant that Katakuri could technically avoid power creep if nothing drastic in Wano happened, but something drastic in Wano happened. Luffy went from being one-shotted by Kaido to then being able to take attacks from Kaido just because he learned advanced armament haki. That right there is what can spell a disaster for characters like Katakuri, who technically should be on the levels of characters like King and whatnot, but when you really deep it, he can't be, because King has shown better feats, and you can then even argue other characters like Queen, if you really wanted to, near Katakuri's level, when it just shouldn't be that, because Katakuri is meant to be portrayed above them, but due to power creep and story progression, that happens. And as I said before, this mainly happens due to Haki. The main difference between somebody like Katakuri and Enel, even though Enel lost, you can then say that, oh yeah, if Luffy could be hit by the brunt of Enel's attacks and actually take damage, Luffy probably wouldn't even be stronger than him coming out of the pre-time skip. But you can't say that for Katakuri and Luffy literally 50 chapters into Wano. It just doesn't happen. And you know what's crazy? Even though I keep talking about Katakuri, in my eyes and in the community's eyes, he isn't the person who has suffered from it the most. It was actually Crocodile for a very long time until he was then buffed by that said thing. Power creep is a double-edged sword, and Crocodile showcases that beautifully. From being taken out by the start of the Grand Line Luffy to then being a commander on a Yonko crew alongside Mihawk. That is what Powercreep can do to you. That right there is probably one of the main reasons I'm even making this video, and that is another main reason why a lot of people are trying to force that narrative of Kaido. And I won't sit here and lie and say that I don't joke about it, but I do know that in due time, and probably by the end of Elbaf, that will be a reality. See, for a second time in a row, what Luffy has done is he's beaten an opponent, but to the community as a whole, we don't see it as a W. So what it allows Oda to do is it allows him to have a little bit of wiggle room and allow their status to stay as legendary as it was before Luffy fought them. But unfortunately, with how the story is going, it doesn't look that way, as you can't keep Kaido up there for so long if you then need to introduce many other things to then deal with these new characters. You see, since Haki is so pivotal to the story now, it basically just boils down to who has better Haki. And that is something that a lot of the fans don't like, and that is something that I will admit I don't like myself, but that is how the story is going so far. And the worst thing about this is that Kaido was the one to preach that Haki transcends all, and he even knew what an awakening was, but never even tried to achieve it. Those two things there are what's going to severely hold him back from them being in those top talks like he was before and what the story portrayed him out to be. See, even if you did have Kaido at that top 1 spot, he would then have to move down naturally, because people inside the story need to be stronger than him to give Luffy entertaining fights, and so he grows stronger. That is just how battle shonen work, and that is what's going to happen inside the story. Kaido can't stay at that number 1 spot, and so why are solidifying him at that spot unless you was going to then bring up another thing that he may not have done and been like, oh yeah, but he could have done that, that's why he's still number 1. That is where power creep kicks in and then boots him out of that spot. At the bare minimum, we have 2 Luffy opponents that are left inside the story, Emu and Blackbeard. And we know that their fights are going to be next level, and so we're going to need to see Luffy level up some more, and that in turn will then leave Kaido in the dust. And for all we know, Luffy could have many other fights outside of just those 2. We only know that those 2 are confirmed, so for all we know, there could be some secret boss out there that Luffy then has to take on, and that will then impede Kaido even more. The thing of power creep inside of One Piece has, in my opinion, taken a turn for the worst ever since Haki was introduced. As if it was just devil fruits or just basic Haki, you could then argue that, oh, this person's abilities made Luffy work harder in this way, instead of them just being, oh yeah, you're just flat out stronger, so you just win the fight. That is what's impeded the story as it's gone on. And I've talked about it multiple times now, but I need to, because he is the perfect way to introduce an antagonist and not have them power crept for the rest of the story if you're going to make them that big person. And that's Enel. Enel is somebody that was introduced and technically wasn't power crept until we got into the post time skip. Why? His moveset was very different, and so Luffy had to do something else, and well, as we know, Luffy was his natural enemy, so he was able to fight him and get away with it. Somebody else like Lucci wouldn't have been able to get away with it. And you can't say, oh, if Lucci was able to hit him, that isn't a what if. It's just simple. And now, because his powers are different, would naturally just beat Lucci. And that's just how it goes. And that is something that a lot of people do miss. Power creep in One Piece is something that I felt like in the beginning didn't really exist, and if it did exist, it wasn't really that bad, as I felt like it was just natural progression instead of it happening due to just another ability being introduced that the character previously technically should have had but never got. Like, you mean to tell me that throughout his 48 years or something of living, that Doflamingo never decided to go and get Future Sight or at least Advanced Armament Haki? You mean to tell me that Katakuri got Future Sight but never went to go get Advanced Armament Haki or even try to tap in to Advanced Conqueror's Haki? There are so many things here that I'm just sitting there like, I don't know why these certain characters haven't done that yet, but It's just what happens with the story, and then Oda coming up with new ideas as it goes along. To be honest, technically speaking, advanced armament haki has been there since the pre-time skip, so Oda not giving them advanced armament haki, you could say, is fair, but still, it feels like we are robbed of these characters technically being stronger since they were portrayed to be on that level but just won. And so this is where I then want to obviously wrap up this video. And what I'm here to say is that natural progression inside of stories isn't bad, as One Piece is a shonen. But how it's gotten lately, due to just things being introduced and just the story progressing at a way faster rate, it makes you feel like the power creep is insane and is really bad. Now, one thing I will give to Oda, and one thing that we do complain about, but when it comes down to it, we can actually pat him on the back for, is for keeping things vague. When Oda keeps things vague, it allows us to obviously not know where the person is at in power, where they could vaguely be, but we don't know exactly where. So when it's then fully revealed, we can then be like, oh, okay, so maybe we were just undershooting them, or maybe we were just putting them too high on a pedestal. And that is something that Oda has done extremely well. For instance, we don't know exactly where all admirals rank in power, but we do know where they should roughly be. That is something that Oda has done extremely well, and he's done the exact same thing for the Yonko. This is something that I actually do rate Oda for, and I think we should all rate him a little bit more for, as this does actually avoid power creep as a whole. But to answer the question, is power creep in One Piece going too far? In my personal opinion, humble and intellectual opinion, no, not yet. And I do believe that is because we are in the final saga, and I do believe that the natural story progressions is valid, and a lot of people do need to remember that power creep is only absurd if the portrayal naturally doesn't back it. That is when power creep is insane. But if the portrayal does back up where you're getting at in terms of power, then it's just not power creep in a bad sense. It's just the story naturally progressing and Luffy then having to match it. But with that being said, that is the end of the video. The reason I even decided to make this video was because of the chapter and the leaks and everything, and I was going to drop this video earlier this week, but I said, you know, I'll save it for the back end of this week. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, because I did enjoy making it, as this is a topic that a lot of people do need to talk about, and obviously need to I feel like I need to be that person to be the mediator and actually explain it for everybody. So yeah, I love you all, and I shall see you guys in the next video. Love you all. Goodbye.